Parents of criminals, do you ever blame yourself for how they ended up? I'm the exact opposite. I am the child of a criminal, and I feel guilty from time to time. When I was younger, I thought that if I was just better, she'd love me more than the drugs led to great grades, scholarships, and I was never in trouble. Now that I'm older, if I could just afford to pay for an out-of-state rehab, because she keeps going back to sob boyfriend, maybe she would get better. I've finally gotten my grandmother to stop giving her money and give her only food, shelter, clothing. I'm the parent of a likely future criminal. I doubt I'll feel even an ounce of guilt. Instead, I'll only feel sadness. My son's backstory is pretty terrible. Born to an uneducated teen mom who was the victim of abuse, neglect, and incest. Abused and neglected throughout early childhood by both mom and the many men in her life. Thrust into foster care at age 4 along with his infant half-brother, bounced from foster home to foster home and occasionally back to mom, and so on. We adopted him and his brother in December after about 18 months in our home. I was the first and only stable father figure in his life. He can be a sweet, wonderful boy, but when he's not, he's been diagnosed with the alphabet, ADHD, rad, odd, etc. For whatever good those diagnoses are, he lies, he steals, he gets violent, he swears. I've got to give birth mom credit. She did bless him with a creative vocabulary. You don't know the meaning of self-centered until you've spent time with somebody like my son. We're doing everything in our power to help him, and we'll continue that as long as we can. We've researched behavioral disorders and parenting styles. We've consulted doctors and therapists, and we've worked closely with school, church, family, and other resources available to us. We have made progress, but even baby steps take so much longer than we expected. The damage done to him is far more ingrained in him than we feared. When I call my son a likely future criminal, I don't mean to suggest that I've lost hope or that I'm dismissing him in any way. I'm just being honest. Even with all of the help available to him, the odds are against my son. I look at the progress he's made and the progress yet to be made, and time just isn't on his side. So if the day comes that I get a phone call saying my son is in custody, I won't blame myself at all. I'll treat that hurdle as pragmatically as I've treated all the others we've come across. My brother is on bail pending a conviction that's probably going to go through. He has been a thief ever since he was 2-3. He was brought up in the same household style as me and my other brothers, but his whole life he has stolen from us others whilst we're not thieves. At 8 he stole and hid our grandmother's ring that was an heirloom. He had no method to sell it, he just hoarded things till he was 16 or so, and he started selling to friends' pawn shops. He pawned all of my Xbox games at one point. It came to a head and he was eventually thrown out of the house because the accountant calculated over £5,000 was missing from the business we ran over the course of 3 months. My mother has said she doesn't blame herself. He is just a broken person and has always been like it. Of course she would prefer him not to be in prison, but if he is going to steal, he is going to be punished. That reminded me of the scene from Requiem of a Dream where the guy sells his mother's TV and she had to retrieve it and the pawnbroker knew her by name. I'm sorry to hear about your brother. I don't have children, but I have a stepbrother who has had some unfortunate luck. We rarely see him now, and I'm not really sure things are looking up for him. I know he drinks and has some drug use. I think his dad, my stepdad, has just come to terms with it. I think, at a certain point, you have to just detach yourself and realize there's nothing you can do for a loved one unless they actually want change. I'd like to think my stepdad doesn't blame himself, but my stepbrother made the choice to stay with his mom, and her bad habits rubbed off on him. I have no doubts that, if he had stayed with us in high school, things would be a lot different now. He might not be in college, but he would be in a position to better himself more adequately. Not a parent here, but my friend's father was caught molesting his 14-year-old grandson. The whole family thinks that the grandson had seduced him. So fricked up. What the frick? Jesus. I think the parents who do blame themselves are generally the ones who shouldn't, and vice versa. Parents taking the blame means they care too much for their kids. The problem comes when these same parents continue to enable the negative behavior. I've had some pretty serious issues with alcohol and drugs in the past. Trips to detox, hospital, etc. My family was dysfunctional when I was younger, though not as bad as many others. But I know for a fact that they both blame themselves for all of my problems. It doesn't feel very good when your parents ask you things like, is it because I drank when you were younger, I paid too much, not enough attention to you? Didn't I expected too much from you? My expectations were too high. Feels bad. I think parents are more likely to blame themselves if they're relatively good parents than if they actually were probably more responsible for their child's issues by being crappy parents and or people. I have a brother and he's bipolar. My mom has no regrets about the fricked up stuff he's done. Bipolar people are extremely hard to deal with, especially when they think they don't need their medication. He says M is working for him, but we all know it won't, and no sense reporting him to the cops because our judicial system only cares about the punishment and doesn't give a crap about rehabilitation. My brother is in prison. He has no one to blame but himself. My parents didn't make him do drugs, lie, or steal from unlocked cars or homes. My brother made those decisions all by himself and he is paying for them now. My mom and dad tried to help him. They really did. 3 different rehab programs, and going to court with him during his first probation. Eventually they just realized that nothing they did was going to affect his behavior, and lo and behold, after his second stint in Cook County Jail, my brother was convicted and sent to prison. I don't think there is anything they could have done differently. Some people are just selfish buttholes, like my brother. Cook County is a bad place to be locked up temporarily. My aunt was 17 when she had my cousin. I do believe that she blames herself for bringing him into the world when she wasn't entirely ready to be a good parent. However, she gave him everything that she could given the circumstances, and despite hardship, she was the best mother she could be. Unfortunately, her son turned out to be schizophrenic and ended up spending his entire 20s in jail. Since then, he has spent all of his time split equally between prison and homeless shelters. The real shame is, he was one of the greatest artists I have ever met. His drawings and paintings should be hung in a gallery somewhere, but he'd rather break into cars for money. Fortunately, my aunt had a daughter 3 years after him whom she gave an equally loving and supportive childhood, who went on to become extremely successful and just wonderful all around. Without her, I think my aunt would feel all of the responsibility for what my cousin became. I worked in the vice principal's office when my younger brother was in school. Every time he got into trouble, I lost the detention slip. He was my little brother, so I felt I had to protect him. Years later, he died in prison. He had a seizure while serving time for selling drugs. I can't help feeling that if I'd made him serve a few of those detentions, he might still be alive today. Perhaps a few hours in detention would have made him realize there are consequences for his actions. He's been dead for over 10 years, and I still feel responsible. On the other hand, my other brother, who was just 1 year younger and whose detention slips were also lost, is married with 2 kids and a job he loves. I guess there's no real moral here. There is. Just because people close to you make their own decisions, doesn't mean we don't carry some of the guilt and wish it could be different. That's what makes us good humans. My older sister is not a criminal, but she is bipolar and causes my entire family a lot of grief and drama. I think my dad does feel guilty about it but knows he shouldn't. He said this to me the other day on the phone and it really resonated with me. Your mother and I loved each other. We were in love and had a baby, and now it is this monster. That is sad. My cousin is a 31-year-old addict, thief, deadbeat dad, etc. He has been in prison jail most of his adult life. My aunt had to adopt his daughter because the mom also has issues. My cousin was always in trouble in school, but my aunt always blamed someone else, the teachers, principal, or the other kids. It was never the fact that there was no stability in the home with a revolving door of dads, or that these guys did drugs in the house, or she was more interested in getting laid than paying attention to her son. It has only been in the last year or so that she's been willing to admit her mistakes with him. It's only because she is raising his daughter and she had to come to the realization that she had to do things differently for her granddaughter to have a chance to live a good life. And thankfully, her granddaughter is doing well in school and thriving. especially since my cousin is no longer around to be a bad role model. So the answer is that yes, sometimes parents of criminals can recognize and accept their responsibility for how their kids turned out, but it may take another person or situation holding up a mirror in front of them. My father was executed for murder about 8 years ago. After he was arrested, my mom says she blamed herself a lot but eventually realized he was always a loose cannon and totally crazy and drug addicted, and it was really only a matter of time before he did something stupid. His adoptive mom blamed herself until the day she died, though, which is pretty tragic considering how much she loved him to the end. My brother is currently in jail for armed robbery of a Keesler Federal Credit Union. He did not use a real gun, water gun painted to look real, so he's only in for 9 months, but he's still considered a felon. He robbed a bank because he was desperate. He had no money, student loan payments were due, he was about to be evicted from his apartment, and he needed money for food. My mother, along with the rest of our family, never expected this. He is really smart, had good grades, and is a generally wonderful person. The first thing she thought was, why didn't I help my son? My mom isn't very well off, so she couldn't really send him money. My whole family feels responsible for this, as none of us helped him, even though we did not know of his situation and he did not ask for help. Right now we're doing the best we can to get his probation transferred to where my grandfather lives, as he has offered to give him a job as long as he works his hardest. He gets out on Wednesday, my birthday, next week. My brother is one of those lesser criminals. He's not shooting and stabbing, but deals drugs to get by. Mostly, the amount of bad karma he has attracted is freaking staggering. I've lost thousands trying to help him, giving him my last $20 during uni, so that he could get to work and keep his job. I lost my car to him. It wound up in a car park smashed up. Then he threatened to smash my new car and put me in hospital if I did not tell him where it was towed to. He uses the power of empathy to win people over, and then get them to give him as much money as possible. It's pretty dark when you finally realize what he does. This is where it gets relevant. My mother is a good Christian woman who blames herself for everything. She's lost the most to this behavior, and still blames herself. My father has had enough, and has washed his hands of him. He sells drugs and tries to turn my family against me, failing these days, and I'm starting my own business. I'm the elder of the two, and I've copped more of the crappy upbringing than him, yet he's the ball of trash. I blame myself for my current financial woes for not cutting him out of my life sooner. I knew what he was, I just didn't feel in my bones. If I could visit my previous self, I beat the living crap out of my former self every day until that younger self dropped contact with my brother. People make choices, your upbringing guides you, but ultimately you choose what life you live. Some people become Sorry about the brother, good luck with your business. My cousin is in prison for a triple homicide. He is 19. My aunt and uncle blamed me when he was arrested. I'm 15. They said I had given him evil thoughts by playing Halo with him, which he introduced to me. This is slightly related. I'm a landlord and lease in an area that is almost exclusively college students. Over the years, I've discovered that if someone's mom calls around for them to find them housing, instead of the student calling themselves, or if said mom gushes, to me, the prospective landlord, about what a good kid their son is, and how he's turning out really well, then these are giant red flags to me. Almost all of my problem tenants, doing drugs, drinking, loud parties, non-responsive to corrective feedback, have fit this profile, and it is remarkably consistent. Now, if a mom calls around to find their son a place to live, I do not call back. I still fill my property with students, still mostly guys, who call on their own behalf and take responsibility for themselves. My cousin is definitely a criminal, and I think my aunt has fallen into the stereotypical role of enabler. I know this is supposed to be first-hand account, so this is probably annoying that I'm answering, but it's really crazy watching a parent constantly supply a frick up with money out of maternal love and guilt. I think she does feel bad that he ended up the way he did, and her response is to be at his beck and call financially, even though that's worse for him in the long run. She seems to act like not a lot is wrong. She gets crazy, emotional, drug-rattled rants from him at all hours of the night and she puts up with it. I don't know, it seems fricked up, but she sticks by him. I think even if she doesn't blame herself for how he turned out, she does. I think she feels very, very responsible for sticking by him even now that he is pretty much gone off the deep end. No. It's fine if people who aren't parents of criminals comment. It's relevant, so it's fine. Anyway, I hope his mother realizes she's being an enabler. I think one of the hardest things to do is to convince an enabler that they are one. My brother isn't in jail yet, but he is headed that way. He dropped out of high school, isn't homeless or couch hopping. My mother feels very responsible. She believes she should have disciplined differently, spent more time with him, pretty much anything. It drives her crazy. She did kick him out of her house because she just couldn't take his freeloading, drug using, disrespectful ways anymore. She regrets it, but my dad and I are grateful she did. Every one of my ex-friends that grew up to be criminals had very little parental interaction. That knowledge has been part of the foundation on how I raised my kids. So I pay attention to them and try to help them out when I can. After the part of raising them is past, if they do eventually get something sinister, they would have their own reasons. I've broke a few laws and have had a few jail sentences. My parents blame me and only me. I knew better and they didn't raise an idiot. Haven't been in trouble in years, but I still see the judgment in my parents' eyes when I look at them. Note to self, if my wild child gets into trouble, but straightens out, try very hard to let it go, or at least don't let him see any judgment in my face. My cousin is dead. I still blame myself just a little. He's not even my real cousin. Foster kid adopted by my aunt's ex-mother-in-law. But I grew up with him till about the age of 14, then they moved to Vegas, bad crap happened, got in some legal trouble, rehab, and he was finally turning his life around. Moved back to SD on his own and I see him once and wanna hang out with him soon. Then about a month goes by and turns out he got stabbed to death in a public bathroom on his way home from work. If only I wasn't so busy and could have gave him rides so he didn't have to take public transit in sketchy areas. My daughter was a straight A student in high school. Beautiful, worked 2 jobs, had her own car, was always dressed nice, and had plans to go to college. Then she met him, her boyfriend, who had been an H addict for 10 years. He got her into using it and now she has been an H addict for 6 years. I blamed him and myself for years. I would cry every night and wonder what I could have done to prevent this. My daughter lied, stole, and has sold drugs to support her habit. She beat the crap out of me one night and I called the police on her. I worked to get her into drug rehab and foolishly believed that would work. The boyfriend followed her down there and went to the same rehab. They managed to fool everyone for 9 months before they got caught using again and was thrown out. She has been in and out of rehab, jail and prison and none of it sticks. I tried to help her because I felt so guilty about her using. She even tried to blame her drug use on me because I adopted her and she didn't know her real parents. What a bunch of bulls. She was arrested again and when she went to court she told the judge that she started using H at 19. Then it hit me. I raised her and for 19 years she was drug free. When she turned 19 she decided to start to use drugs. If I couldn't tell her who she could date and what to do after she turned 18, then I sure as crap couldn't force her not to do drugs. She was old enough to know better and knew how bad H was. I finally let myself off the hook that day and stopped blaming myself for her choices. I even stopped blaming her dumbass boyfriend for her being on H too. After all, he didn't force her to do it. She chose to. She is still with him. They just finished a stint in prison, got out and got an apartment and are still together. They said this time they will stay clean. Time will tell. I have a brother who has been to federal prison twice. Wire fraud the first and bank robbery the second. After his latest release from prison, he moved in with my mother and stole from her. I had to forcibly evict him from her home. He has stolen more than $50K from my parents over the years, yet they continue to try and help him. The only thing I think that should have been done differently is that instead of enabling him over the years by giving him a place to live and allowing him to steal from them, they should have cut him off from the family years ago. He learned that he could always have the family to steal from. because no one ever did anything about it. I and my other brother both live productive lives and contribute to society. After a certain point in life, you are an adult and responsible for your actions, no matter the upbringing you had. In my case, we had a fairly normal upbringing in an upper middle class family. My cousin was the star in the family. My dad's sister had him when she was in America, thus making him the very first kid of our first generation group. He could do no wrong. He was popular in school, very smart. Apparently he got into a bad group of people, started to sell drugs, hang with gang members, and yet the family refused to see the bad things he was doing. In the midst of his drug deals, he was stricken with severe arthritis. From what I heard, it was one of the rarest ones out there. It prohibited from going about his business, which resulted his home getting shot up by people he owed money to. He was moved to the West Coast to live with my grandma, in which he still dealt drugs from her bedroom window. Shady characters were always hanging around the apartment in some alleyway, as he slipped them drugs. His arthritis got the better of him. He was moved back to the East Coast, where he committed suicide in his tub. He is still regarded as one of the best kids in the family, when comparing to all the other cousins. Apparently, I'm the worst one, the black sheep, the one no one talks to. But I'm the only one that's finished college, hasn't got knocked up, and living on my own. My ex-husband is incarcerated in federal prison. We were together for 12 years, through 2 prison sentences, multiple stints in county jail and rehab, and drug-induced psychosis. For the longest time I thought if I just loved him enough and stuck around a little bit longer, he'd see the light, get sober, and we live happily ever after. Nope. I took my then 4-year-old son and got the heck out as I watched his father spiral downward into sea heck. He almost died twice. Motorcycle crash while high, then overdose, before he finally got arrested again and sent to Fed prison. TLDR. C is a heck of a drug. None of my kids have committed any crime yet. 15 months. But I have siblings that have done some serious stuff. It's lack of parent involvement in their lives. That's what I've boiled it down to. My parents aren't bad people. We're immigrants and had to work excessively to get food on the table. Fortunately for me, I hung out with relatives and wasn't too exposed to that way of life. My 2 brothers hung out with those types of people, gangbangers, thuji, lowlife, and they've been like that since then. My parents' house have been raided by the police. They've been in and out of jail, even juvenile prison. Own more guns than hunters I know. Homemade tattoos, the whole 9 yards. I hope your parents don't take blame for any of that. They did what was necessary to support you guys. My best friend was jailed for selling drugs. I tried for years to get him to stop. When I finally just put my foot down and cut him off, he surrounded himself with enabling drug users and a 300-pound girlfriend to finance his way through prison. He'll be out of the halfway house in 1 month. He is clean and on a better path now, but no way will he be involved in my life ever again. I do blame his mother for having a string of abusive husbands who doled out the mental and physical varieties. I blame the men more, but she is not off the hook because she allowed her son to be exposed to these things. I think she does blame herself, because she is falling all over herself to buy him the things he's going to need to get back into society. I wonder how long it will be until he backslides. I know a woman who has 3 children, all criminals to some degree. She was never home with any of them and left them home at 12, 10, and 8 years old while she went 1,000 miles away to stay for 3 months. She just cannot understand how they turned out this way. One of the kids was actually shot while buying crack in an urban area, and they had a benefit for the kid because of this tragedy that happened. One other kid has stolen her car more than once and she drops the charges even when she did not get her car back because he traded it for crack. I am the child of a criminal, so I don't know if this counts. My old man was arrested in 1981 for subversive writing under the statute set forth by the Polish communist government. He wrote for various Solidarnosc newspapers for a couple of years and was subsequently imprisoned for 2.5 years and then deported to Canada. I've heard some interesting prison stories from him during my lifetime. I guess it's all how you view the crime. I don't feel responsible. I was 4 at the time, but I remember feeling sad when the military police took him away. Don't remember much more. In any case, he was happy to be in a free society like Canada after the deportation. This lasted about 10 years until he became disillusioned with the West's, as Canada, corporatist fascistic government. He's a bitter old man now, and I get emailed random articles from him from time to time about various governmental improprieties. Some interesting, some not, and some downright crazy. I see him on the holidays, and you should see people's faces when we discuss politics in coffee shops or restaurants. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.